The battlefield was silent, but the silence screamed of coming war. The Israelites had marched to face the Philistines once more, but their hearts were far from God. They brought swords, shields, and the memory of former glory, but not repentance. And when the clash came, they were crushed. 4,000 men fell, and with their bodies so did their pride. Confused and shaken, the elders gathered. They did not ask, "Why have we turned from the Lord?" Instead, they asked, "Why has the Lord defeated us today?" As if he were a tool, a weapon to be wielded on command. So they reached for what they thought was their secret weapon, the Ark of the Covenant. But the Ark is not a charm. They summoned Hophni and Phinehas, wicked sons of Eli, corrupt priests who had long profaned the altar of God. And with filthy hands, they carried the holy Ark from the tabernacle at Shiloh to the battlefield. The people shouted as the Ark entered the camp, a thunderous roar of misguided confidence. The ground shook with their voices, but heaven did not. In the Philistine camp, fear spread. "The gods have come into the camp," they cried. "Woe to us! Who can deliver us from these mighty gods?" They remembered Egypt. They remembered the plagues. But fear turned into fury, and fury into resolve. "Be men and fight," they shouted. And they did. The battle was unlike any other. Israel, though bearing the Ark, was struck down. 30,000 soldiers perished that day. The Ark, the symbol of God's presence, was captured. Hophni and Phinehas died by the sword judgment falling as foretold. The news traveled fast. A lone Benjaminite ran from the battlefield to Shiloh. His clothes were torn, dust covering his head. He arrived as Eli, now 98, sat by the gate, blind, waiting. He didn't tremble for his sons. He trembled for the Ark. The messenger told it all, the defeat, the death, and to the capture. And when he said, "The Ark of God has been taken," and Eli fell backward, his neck broke. He died. But it wasn't just Eli's neck that broke. It was the last thread of a priestly line that had resisted correction, ignored prophetic warnings, and chosen family over obedience. The tragedy didn't end there. Phinehas's wife was near delivery when she heard the news: her husband dead, her father-in-law gone, and the Ark captured. She went into labor in despair. As she breathed her last, she named her son Ichabod. The glory has departed. The glory had indeed departed from Israel, but not forever. The Ark of God, once the most sacred symbol of Yahweh's covenant with Israel, was now in enemy hands. Carried away by Philistine warriors who had no understanding of its power, no reverence for its holiness. They paraded it like a trophy of war, mocking the God of Israel as if he were defeated. They took it to Ashdod, into the temple of their god, Dagon, and set the Ark beside the idol, a foreign god beside the true God. They believed they had triumphed, but God was not mocked. The next morning, Dagon was face down on the ground, eterned before the Ark of the Lord. The priests were puzzled, perhaps unnerved, but they lifted the statue and put it back in place. They thought it was a coincidence. The second morning they returned, and this time Dagon had fallen again. But now his head and hands were severed, lying on the threshold. Only the torso remained. It was no accident. It was judgment. Terror swept over the city. Soon plagues began to spread. The people of Ashdod were struck with tumors. Panic turned to desperation. They sent the Ark to Gath, hoping to rid themselves of its curse. But Gath fared no better. The hand of the Lord came heavily against them. People of all ages were afflicted. Death and disease followed the Ark wherever it went. From Gath they moved it to Ekron. But by then the fear had taken over. The people of Ekron cried out, "They have brought to Surdna the Ark of the God of Israel, to kill us and our people." They were right to fear. For 7 long months the Philistines kept the Ark, and for 7 months they suffered under the weight of divine wrath. Their cities were ravaged not by armies, but by the presence of a holy God who refused to be treated like a trophy. Eventually the leaders of the Philistines gathered and said, "What shall we do with the Ark of the Lord?" They sought counsel from their priests and diviners. These pagan advisors, though misguided in theology, had a sobering insight. "Do not send it back empty," they said. "Send it back with a guilt offering." They crafted 5 golden tumors and 5 golden rats, symbols of the plague that had afflicted them, and placed them in a chest beside the ark. Then they prepared a cart, pulled by 2 cows that had never been yoked, separating their calves from them, a test of divine direction. If the cows went straight toward Israelite territory, they would know the hand of the Lord had done this. If not, they would assume it was coincidence. The people watched breathlessly as the cows, lowing as they went, headed straight toward Beth Shemesh, never turning aside. It was not coincidence. It was God, and in Beth Shemesh, the people rejoiced. They saw the ark returning on its own, untouched by human guidance. They offered sacrifices of thanksgiving. The glory was coming back. But even joy must be accompanied by reverence. Some men of Beth Shemesh dared to look inside the ark, something strictly forbidden. They violated the holiness of God with curiosity and carelessness, and judgment came swiftly. 70 men fell dead that day. The people mourned again and cried out, "Who can stand in the presence of the Lord, this holy God?" So they sent messengers to the nearby town of Kiriath Jearim, asking them to come and take the ark. And there it remained in the house of Abinadab, with his son Eleazar consecrated to guard it. For 20 years the ark stayed there, no longer in the center of worship, no longer at Shiloh, but hidden away like a relic of the past, and the people of Israel lamented after the Lord. They mourned, not just the loss of the ark, but the loss of God's manifest presence. A generation had lived in rebellion, treating God like a symbol, not a sovereign. But now the pain of judgment began to awaken something deeper. It began to stir repentance. And that's when Samuel stood up. 20 years had passed. The ark remained in Kiriath Jearim, guarded but forgotten by many. Israel continued in a spiritual fog, wounded by loss, haunted by failure, and fragmented in worship. The glory had departed, and the people knew it. But from the dust of defeat, something sacred began to stir. They began to long again, not for rituals, but for the presence of the Lord. And in that season of mourning and searching, Samuel arose. He wasn't a boy anymore. The child who once heard the voice of God in the night was now the voice of God to the nation. He had grown in wisdom, in stature, in holiness. And now he stood as both prophet and judge over Israel. Samuel gathered the people and spoke with a clarity they hadn't heard in a generation. "If you return to the Lord with all your heart, rid yourselves of the foreign gods and Ashtoreths, and commit yourselves to the Lord, and serve him only then, he will deliver you from the hand of the Philistines." This wasn't just a call to worship. It was a call to repentance, a call to burn idols, a call to smash altars that had no breath and return to the God who had never stopped speaking. And the people responded. They put away the Baals and the Ashtoreths. They fasted. They wept. They gathered at Mizpah, a sacred place of reckoning. And there, under Samuel's leadership, they confessed, "We have sinned against the Lord." Samuel interceded for them. He offered a burnt offering, a lamb whole and spotless. He cried out to the Lord on their behalf. But the Philistines heard that Israel had assembled, and they saw it as an opportunity to strike. They gathered their armies once more, ready to crush a vulnerable, unarmed people. And fear crept in again. The Israelites begged Samuel, "Do not stop crying out to the Lord our God for us, that he may rescue us from the hand of the Philistines." And Samuel did not stop. He stood between the people and the enemy, not with a sword, but with a sacrifice and a prayer. As he offered the lamb, the Philistines drew near. But heaven moved first. The Lord thundered with loud thunder against the Philistines that day. Confusion filled their ranks. They panicked. Their formation broke, and Israel, once paralyzed by fear, surged forward and pursued them with victory. It was not the ark that saved them. It was not their weapons. It was repentance. It was the presence of a holy God returning to a humbled people. And there on the battlefield where God had spoken through thunder and turned defeat into deliverance, Samuel did something prophetic. he took a large stone, set it up between Mizpah and Shen, and called its name Ebenezer, saying, "Thus far the Lord has helped us." Ebenezer, a rock of remembrance, a declaration that victory does not come from man's strength, but from God's mercy, a memorial to grace. From that day forward, the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines. Israel took back the towns that had been stolen, peace settled over the land, and Samuel continued to judge Israel all the days of his life, traveling between cities, administering justice, and pointing the people toward righteousness. He did not build a temple, he did not raise an army, he built altars, he restored worship. He stood as a living bridge between the era of the judges and the coming age of kings. And it all began with a captured ark, a crushed priesthood, and a people finally broken enough to listen. Because sometimes God allows what we cherish to be taken away, not to destroy us, but to awaken us, to bring us back to Himself, to remind us that the glory is not in the box, not in the ritual, not in the outward show, but in the surrendered heart. So the question echoes through the centuries. So where is your Ebenezer? What moment in your life marks the turning point, the place where defeat turned into deliverance, where judgment gave way to mercy, where your cry became your breakthrough? Maybe today is that moment. Maybe today is the day you stop chasing symbols and start chasing the God who speaks. Because even when the ark is gone, the glory can return.